Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this first On the Learning Couch with Dee. Now, I'm Dee Backman-Hoyle and I'm presenting on behalf of the Institute of Learning Professionals. We have an audience behind the camera here. Audience members, would you like to give a round of applause, please? Thank you so much. We are so blessed because in our audience we have absolute professionals, people who have dedicated, I'd hate to think between the years, how many years? Lots, of their knowledge, their expertise and their wisdom and their absolute passion and intent to get behavioural change and to make a difference. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our VIP guests tonight who are on the couch. So, ladies and gentlemen, could I please get you to welcome Leanne Faraday-Brash. And can I get you to welcome Sandy Givens. Now, these ladies have been doing what they've been doing for a couple of years, I'd suggest, and have got many years of expertise. And what we are talking today about is the first 15 minutes of a program. Now, before we start, Leanne, what's your background? What's your expertise? What brought you to where you're at now?
Well, Dee, I work with the dysfunctional and toxic, right through to the high-performing and elite.
Sorry, audience members, that was not directed towards you.
No, and everything in between. I have a confession to make. My hair used to be absolutely dead straight. And this is what working in that field has done to me. But I'm ashamed to say, as a long-term facilitator in strategy and leadership and emotional intelligence, before it was even called emotional intelligence, it took me until a couple of years ago to work out that everything I do in my consulting practice as an org psych is basically 4 words. And it's just safe workplaces, great workplaces. And everything we do with our clients actually is taking them along the continuum from safe to great. And that's really what I devote my time to, and after 20 years or so I still have an enormous passion for working in that area.
And Leanne, you and I have co-facilitated. We've been on the road together and we have shared... Sorry? A bit of a Thelma Louise, wasn't it? It really was. And we have had many laughs and we've had big groups of people that we've worked with. And that really has kept us on our toes. So thank you for coming along. It's just wonderful to have your expertise. Thank you. Sandy, you've been doing what you've been doing for a while, and for a long time you were absolutely the brand reputation about women and women's leadership. That was something that you were incredibly passionate about. Where are you now?
I'm still very passionate about that, but anyone who's working for themselves know that you have to put food on the table, and so you kind of have to follow the money. And there's 2 things I'm equally passionate about, and one is women's development and helping women find their voice in the world. But the other thing I'm passionate about is teaching people to be nice to each other, and which is how my then 5-year-old son described what I did for a living to someone who asked him. And I love how you put it though, what toxic and dysfunctional through to the, I don't know that I work at either of those ends. But yeah, I'm really focused on helping people take off their masks and get comfortable and confident in having tough conversations with each other, which they have to have.
So tonight, thank you for both of you for that background. It's really important. And tonight, what we've decided to focus on is to go sort of quite deep in a narrow particular field of the first 15 minutes. We'll extend it a little bit beyond the first 15 minutes to getting prepared for the first 15 minutes. But we'll start with, you're about to go into a program. Let's call it a learning environment. It could be a range of learning environments. It could be face-to-face. It could be a webinar-based or an online application of some sort. What do you need to do to get yourself into a really strong and healthy mindset so that you present yourself in the best way you can? Leanne, can I start with you on that one?
Sure. Well, at the risk of sounding like I'm not very responsive to my clients, the first thing I need to do is actually get away from my clients for about the last 10 or 15 minutes or so before I go on. And often I have to pre-negotiate that and frame it, as please don't think me rude, but you'll probably find in the last few minutes before I actually go on to run, whether it's an intervention, whether it's compliance training for people who don't want to be there, or for people who are very excited to be there, is just to actually have some time with myself and just put the finishing touches on whatever the frame is for the people, whatever story I might begin with, the way in which I choose to introduce myself to establish some credibility without appearing to take myself too seriously, and just really focus on being warm and responsive to people from the beginning, and having them understand that I respect the fact that they've come along, whether they chose to be there or didn't choose to be there. They are here, this is an opportunity, this is an investment of time, and I'm excited about the opportunity to work with them wherever they are at. I need to get myself in that place that this is a privilege, and do a lot of breathing and thinking about the frame so that I land well at the very beginning.
Yeah. Picking up on that point about asking for that small amount of privacy so that you can be on your own and that you can clear out anything that's not going to be particularly useful, the residual leftover stuff. How do you find clients sort of respond to that? You talked about framing it and you talked about sort of explaining it to them. I'm imagining the times where people just open a door and come on in. And there's that need to be polite and connect and build this sense of rapport. But at the same time, there's a part that says, I need space.
Absolutely, and I never actually do that on the day. There are a couple of golden rules for me. One of them is that I'll always say to them, at the risk of us sounding, obsessive compulsive, which is a bit embarrassing potentially for a psychologist, I'm probably going to want to be there an hour early. So who's my go-to person an hour early, and how can we make sure I can be there early? More than happy to chat with you when we get there. But you'll probably find that in the last 10 or 15 minutes or so, I'll just want to be on my own because I want to make sure I land really well for your people, and I just need a little bit of time out for me, and I hope that's okay with you. So I don't spring that on them once they've arrived at 8 o'clock, enthusiastic about helping me with whatever it is they can help me with, because then it looks like the royal brush off. So I will always do that before, and I will fight tooth and nail to make sure I've got access early, and then if the client wants to see me early, then I absolutely belong to them, and then after that I belong to me. Another big anchor is my music. I have only just a very few things in the playlist at the beginning of a training or some sort of facilitation that actually bring me to that room and remind me that I'm about to do a training or an intervention or a facilitation, because this is the music that anchors me, and then that helps me get in the pocket as well.
And Sandy, for you, that moment where you've sort of had some bumpy starts to the day. It hasn't gone perfectly. The car park is not easy to find.
Oh, that
and the floor, you can't quite remember which floor again am I meeting the client, and damn, I've forgotten a connection to bring in my bag.
This never happens.
I know. It never happens to me because I'm so highly professional. But for you, how critical is it for you to get yourself into a great mind?
I think it's critical for all of us. I was just sitting here admiring you and framing all that up for your client and everything. I just go to the ladies' room. I just say, excuse me, I have to go to the ladies' room for 10 minutes. So I'm not worried about getting them out of the room. I just say, I need to go to the ladies' room for 5 minutes. So I'm just sitting here going, wow, aren't you nice? I just disappear. I used to be, one of the great things about getting older is you get tired, and so you don't sweat the small stuff as much. And I used to be really worried about, okay, what I'm going to say, and what comes first, what comes second, and yada, yada, yada. Whereas now, I do go to the ladies' room, and while I'm washing my hands, I have this mantra. I say, be there with them. Be there with them. And it just shifts my mindset to them and being able to be aware of what's ever going on in the room. yeah, so that's important to me. I use music too a lot. And it's different on a webinar. You mentioned webinars before. So when I first started running webinars, I'm thinking, oh my God, where the faces? I actually would stand up as if it was face to face, and I blue tacked photos of all my friends and family on the window. So it was just such a mind jump for me to go from face to face to, hello, is anyone out there? Is anyone listening? So I decided not to worry about the first several webinars I ran. Don't worry about whether anyone's listening or whether even anyone's there, and what the attentiveness panel is showing me or the dashboard. Just look at these people and talk to these.
So that created that state for you where you still had to have the level of energy that would be required if you were face to face, which is so important because the tonality then takes over very often, doesn't it?
And I think, like any of us, we could look at, workshops or trainings or things we did 5 years ago, 3 years ago. Oh God, I feel like going back and apologising to those people because I've learned more since then, and I could do it better. Well, same way, I feel like I should go back to all those people who attended my first 20 webinars and say, I can do it better. Because it's just like any skill. You get used to it.
So we've sort of established that it's so important to get yourself into a really strong mind, as well as that to have a level of energy that you need to carry with you. And that leads me to this next question about creating a great first impression. This isn't a new question. I think we've been talking about this for the last so many years, but it's still so critical. That first impression, that moment when they see you, that 15 seconds. What are some of the things that are working for you with that? What are the tips?
Well, I always approach them first. And as soon as someone comes in, oh, hi, I'm Sandy, and I'll go up and shake their hand. And I work really hard at remembering their names, so that from the get-go I can say, oh, Dee, Dee and I were chatting before the session this morning, or whatever. And I'm actually, if I go back to that mantra, be there for them, be there with them, because if I'm worried about making a great first impression, I'm making it about me. So what I'm doing is going up and saying, oh, good day, I'm Sandy, and, just kind of welcoming them, like, like this is my lounge room, glad you dropped by, kind of thing. I mean, I've got a really informal style anyway, so I think we all have to do stuff that sits naturally with our own values and style and stuff like that. But a good friend of mine, a networking specialist, Robin Henderson, once gave a networking tip that said, when you go to a networking event, act as if you're the host or the hostess, which she never meant, oh, take over the room or whatever, but it's that mindset of, oh, I can be here to welcome people too. And that's definitely the mindset I have when I'm starting a training session, is just welcome.
And I love your mantra. Mine is no less, no more, maybe different. And that's just what I say to myself all the time. Leanne, what about for you?
Well, I very much like Sandy, I try to make friends in the room before we even begin. I'm also a stickler for names. I have, when you're teaching presentation skills or strategic influence skills, people will say, I notice you're actually good with names. How do you do that? What's your trick? And I say, can I be direct with you? And they go, sure. And I say, try harder. So just really concentrate when they introduce themselves to you. And even if you haven't got the whole 30 names in the room in the first few minutes and you've only got 28 of them, that's enough to get you by. You can say, Mary, can we start with you? And Mary, perhaps after you, can we talk with Brian? And then the couple you just do a non-verbal gesture. And they don't necessarily know that you don't know their name, but you'll learn it in between. I think in that first few seconds, you've got to land well with your wardrobe, you've got to land well with your energy. I cut my teeth as a trainer however many years ago as the mother of a newborn, feeling very, very lonely, living in suburban or cosmopolitan East Bentley. And the only course that the local community health centre had budget for was alcohol education. So I cut my teeth on convicted drink drivers who had to do my course in order to get their licences back. And so from the very beginning, I worked with people who absolutely categorically did not want to be there. And I'm so grateful for that experience, because every now and then I do get to work with people who do want to be there, and that just seems really a piece of cake. But you do have to, I'm a big believer in landing well in terms of energy. If they don't want to be there, I think you have to be enthusiastic but never evangelistic, because I think they actually believe you're going to be there to judge them, to tell them you know better, to tell them they've been naughty boys and girls, and you absolutely have to defy the stereotype. So when you're working and preaching to the converted, you can be as passionate as you like. But with the others, I think it's more about the relationship than the outcome to start with. And then toward the end of the intervention, it's all about the outcomes, and the relationship recedes into the background, because you and the other parties can take some more of that for granted. Yeah.
So that leads to this question that very occasionally you will get, I fondly call them, and I say this with much love, training prisoners. And our training prisoners are those people that may have turned up on the day to their workplace and be told that they have to backfill someone that's absent, and that today, look, we have to fill the program. We're paying these facilitators a hell of a lot of money.
Oh, a hell of a lot. That's a, tell you what, the big bucks, baby.
That'll make them feel even less resentful about being there.
Yeah, that's right.
Bring on the big bucks.
And you know, there's also the one or two people that feel that this is punitive because it was in not so much of a polite way pointed out to them that in their performance review discussion, I think you need this will fix you, and therefore pop along to this, go along to the program for the day and you'll be fixed by these two ladies. So training prisoners, that you can feel it, you can see it, you sense it, they're sitting there, and they may immediately do the obvious things such as bring out a newspaper, or get their computer set up, because if they've got to sit here for the day, they may as well do a day's work. So let's start with those that don't want to be there. How do we help them? Sandy.
I actually love it when they come in the room, because that's part of the learning for me, part of my growth is, okay, how can I hone these skills a little bit? So one of the things I do is I call it. Like if I sense that there's prisoners in the room, I'll go, so how many people woke up this morning, just couldn't wait to be here? And a self-deprecating humour, it was great. You know, couldn't wait to be here because you knew you were going to get to work with me. You know, and you know, if some poor soul invariably feels badly for me because no one else put their hand up, so they go like this. And so I get up my box of chocolates and start handing out the Freddo frogs. And then I'll say, okay, so would I be right in thinking that some of you woke up this morning and thought, yeah, that's a training. Yeah, well, gosh, you know, I hope I learned something that's actually going to help me. Lots of hands are going up. And I'm throwing out the chocolates. I said, now, how many people just want the chocolates? And so I throw out the chocolates. And then I say, seriously, are there any prisoners here? And they get it. They know. Like, you know, they may not have heard that before, but they, oh yeah, that's me, I don't want to be here. And Marvin Oka, who is a master practitioner of NLP, who I learned from, taught me about pacing and leading. And the whole concept of that is you can't lead anybody until you've met them where they're at first. And so I really believe in meeting them where they're at. I've got to tell a quick story, if I may. The biggest job around pacing I had to do, I had this client who really dysfunctional team, really fractured, and won't bore you with the story of how they got there. But they wanted me to turn them into one big happy family in like 2 or 3 hours, as you do. Anyhow.
And no use of drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah. Could almost do it with drugs temporarily. Anyway, so I explained to the guy, look, you know, 2-3 hours isn't going to cut it. And I understand you know, budget tight, let's do the one session and then see where to from there. So I made it really clear not to expect miracles. Anyhow, he calls me a day before the training. He goes, now, I just thought I'd better tell you, we haven't told the guys about the training. These are all blue-collar workers, right? We haven't told the guys about the training. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, we're just going to let them rock up to work and then we're going to put them on the bus and take them to the venue. Right. I said, and this workshop is about communication skills. honest communication, right? The guy goes, yeah. I said, Steve, you get how this is not good? And he goes, yeah, but if we tell them, I swear to God, half of them won't show up, and that defeats the whole purpose. I mean, we need the whole team there to do this, right? So you can imagine
into the communication formula.
yeah. So like these guys walk in the room. Steve's up the front going, yeah, the big boss. And well, you'll get out what you put in, boys, and all this. Anyway, you could just feel the venom dripping off these guys.
Cliche city.
Yeah. So eventually Steve left me to it, and so I sat forward like this, and I said, so, how you feel about being here? I was staring at the carpet, nobody, avoid eye contact, and I said, oh, am I allowed to use language? Oh, I'll just abbreviate it. I said, well, if I were you, I'd be really peed off. Yeah. And the heads whipped up like that. And I said, oh my God, we're supposed to be talking about communication, and you weren't even communicated with about what was happening in your workday today. Well, that opened up the floodgates. Yeah. And you had to be able to deal with that. But my point is, that's pacing and leading. Like, I could have just shoved on with my content, but what a waste of time that would have been.
Because that comes back to, if we're talking about being in the best mindset we can be in, we need people there with free will. Yeah. And without the free will, and ideally more than that, the intent and motivation to understand, it's just not worth it for anyone.
I say, you're set by your boss, blah, blah, blah. Look, it's your bottom that's going to be on the seat all day. How can I make this helpful to you? And then if I still haven't, I notice by morning tea, there's something, I was like, oh, by the way, I don't do roll call at the end of the day or at lunchtime or anything. If you don't want to be here, that's cool by me. Because I don't want that energy in there. I don't want them dragging down other people.
Yeah, it is contagious. Yeah. Absolutely contagious. Leanne, coming into that sort of notion about training prisoners and very obviously letting you know, I don't want to be there.
Why would I have prisoners?
No, not because of you, dear, because of the issues.
Oh, the work I do.
Yes, the work you do.
Okay. Fine.
And maybe Sandy will also talk about the whole notion of, the bias that potentially a psychologist will have, not your bias, but potentially the audience that you're working with, participants about.
Go on.
Like they're so much more open when they know you're an organisational psychologist.
Yeah. Go on, read my mind. Go on, you're an organisational psychologist.
I'm here to reassure you that the budget does not extend to psychoanalysis, so don't worry about it. You've got nothing to worry about.
Sort of the caveat about no tissues, no tears, no Medicare rebate coming your way. But I want to also think about that whole notion of they bring technology in now, and in some cases we encourage technology. Yep. We say what a great device this is for note taking, for information, location, etc. How do you know when it's okay to sort of encourage the technology or someone potentially hiding behind the technology and you lose them? So we're talking about the training prisoner now coming with their workload to be done through the day as they sit with you.
Yes, absolutely. I'd probably break that down into a few things. Like Sandy, and we have not colluded before we actually sat down on the learning couch together, but I'm a big believer in the principle of if you actually acknowledge how people may be feeling, then they don't have to spend the rest of their day proving it to you. So I will make sure that I've done my research. I will reconnect with my client the day before, even if they gave me a brief weeks and weeks before. Tell me what's been going on in the business the last week or so. Can you gauge the receptivity of people to the training? Is there anything big that's blown up in the business that will either impact on the facilitation that I'm doing or anything that people would reasonably expect me to know or may be annoyed that I don't know? And then I will actually put some hypotheses to them, but it will only ever be hypotheses. I say to them, I fully recognise I may have got this completely wrong, but I'm kind of guessing that maybe some of you here today might be feeling A, B or C. Some of you might be concerned about D, E and F. I know it's actually end of month and we were struggling to find the right dates because for some of you who do X particular role, I know this is a very intense time of the month for you, so I just want to congratulate all of you for showing up. And I'm fully, You know, I'm fully...
Yeah, she's nice.
I'm entertaining the possibility that your level of interest and engagement in this would go from everywhere from a 1 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10. And thank you to those who are 10 out of 10 and the 1 out of 10, just thank you for being here. I'm hoping we can actually improve that, and I will, you know, gesture in a way that sort of auto-suggests improvement over time. But I recognise you're not necessarily as passionate about this stuff as I am. But I'm hoping that we can actually have a bit of a chat which is real and blunt, and you can tell me if I'm way off key, but I think we will be able to find a way to help every one of us here understand why this is important and why it doesn't just matter to me and it may actually matter to you. And then I will use a lot of story and a lot of allegory, sometimes even a pop quiz. I mean, I do some compliance stuff where people, you know, their defences are running at 11 out of 10. You know, they'll tell their filthiest joke walking into sexual harassment training just to prove to themselves that the world as they know it has not actually ended. And so, you know, one of my strategies is to say to them, okay, I'm not necessarily going to assume you're as passionate about this as I am, but let me just put a few things to you. If you have ever said this or heard this, put up your hand. And my first slide might have a string of bullet points. This is political correctness gone mad. How many of you have heard that or said it? Some people are just too sensitive. If it's too hot in the kitchen, why don't they just leave? Why don't people just fit in with the majority, whatever it might be? And they're all going, yep, I've said that. Yep, yeah, and they're nodding with each other, and you've got them. Because they know you understand their world, and you're saying, if you have ever thought that or heard that or said that, I accept that that's the case. I'm not frightened of it. But let's ask ourselves, what might any of those statements have in common? And then you get them into buzz groups talking about, well, I guess it's coming from a pretty egocentric and selfish point of view, and I guess some of those people are a complaint waiting to happen, and I guess it's not really showing empathy for other people, because how do you decide what the majority view ought to be in an organisation, etc., etc., and then all of a sudden they are convincing themselves that they need to be here and that this is relevant, and that I accept they may not be as excited about this, and then they let me in.
And you both put together a very brief story from my experience, which was running emotional intelligence for a group of people who'd been in a merger and were required to stay for another 6 months, just while this merger took place. And you will be sheep dipped, and you will do the program, and you will, whilst you're here for the remaining 6 months, be emotionally intelligent. And the very first thing that this gentleman said to me was, lady, finger point, if you can make me wealthier and more successful than I currently am, I'll stay in the program. Otherwise, I'm out of here. We don't have time to finish the rest of the story. And I gave him literally, like you, there's no role here. If you need to leave, you'll leave. But would you literally give me till morning tea? Would that be a reasonable compromise? And he did.
Yeah.
The other little thing I would always add there.
That should be a recommendation to
Sorry.
you too, yeah.
The other little thing I would always recommend there is just the little tagline about the client. You know, I absolutely respect the fact that you may not necessarily want to be here and may in fact have been asked to be here. Yes, this was called core training. Let's be honest, core training is really subtext for compulsory training.
Yeah.
But from my point of view, you have to own your decision as an adult. The only thing I would ask you to consider is how that will actually go with my client, and that I cannot speak for my client. So I would suggest you actually tic-tac with management, or you decide that you're prepared to live with any consequence of actually withdrawing from the training. But I will leave that with you. And again, it's the NLP, it's the gesture. Over to you, your responsibility. I've now passed the risk and the responsibility for your decision to you. But everyone else has stopped breathing at that point. Everyone else is wanting to see how you handle that rejection. And if you are calm and you are, ironically, emotionally intelligent and you care but you don't care too much, then you are infinitely powerful in that situation, and the others will respect the fact that you didn't monster them. Because if you monster the prisoner, the others will actually start to become anxious that you may monster someone else. And
Well, they might join the monster.
or join the monster. So I don't want them to shoot the
because we've got to help
facilitator.
defend the monster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you actually think all this in your head? Like, here's where I'm thinking. Like, we love learning. often, if you're in this kind of profession, you love learning yourself. And there is this little voice in my head when I see the prisoners and the prisoners start saying, I don't want to be here. I'm thinking, you idiot. It's an opportunity to learn. Don't say that. But
Do not try this at home.
But in my head, I'm thinking, hang on a minute, you're getting paid for your day, you're getting your normal salary, your wage for today, got an opportunity to learn stuff. And the stuff I teach, you can use it outside of work. It's life skill stuff, This could help you in your personal life, and you're complaining.
But then they've possibly got to confront through the course of your enlightening and authentic day that their personal life isn't in such great shape, that their relationships with other people at work aren't in such great shape, and that they may start to have a whole lot of moments. So they're not doing adult emotional intelligence. They're doing either tantruming child in the supermarket lying on the ground kicking their legs, metaphorically speaking, hopefully, or they are doing petulant teenager. Well, lady, if you think my 18-year-old daughter does this better than me, lady,
got the move.
If you think you're going to teach me how to get more wealthy and do then I'll stay.
So, sister, back to you.
Yes,
now,
so
listen.
sister, that's what they're doing.
I'm going to segue into this with the person that meanders in anywhere from 5 minutes to 3 hours late
Is it 2 hour train?
into the program.
I was going to say 2 hours, 55 minutes late for a 3 hour session. But
And you have done anything from early introductions through to you've hit some major concepts. You're really starting to unpack and build and develop the rapport in the room. And there is one or two, oh, sorry, we're late. How do you pick that up from that point and move them forward?
Geez. Well, it does depend on whether you're talking about, 3 hours late in a 1-day program or 3 hours late in a 3-day program or whatever. Do you have an because I'm just trying to picture the scenario. Often what happens is, if let's say it's a 1-day program, I've had people come in at morning tea and go, oh, sorry, I missed the first bit. Right. And, I think, morning tea, I got to go to that ladies' room cubicle and get myself together again, like I did. So I can't, and I'll just sort of suggest they might catch up with so-and-so or, but fundamentally we've covered this and this and this, and you might catch up with them for the detail. If they're 5, 10, 30 minutes late, again, the little voice in my head says, but I say, oh, welcome, there's a spare seat over here. Isn't it funny? They always leave the ones at the front for the late people. That's why everybody's looking at you, And then I'll go to them during the tea break and kind of try to catch them up a little bit. Because the thing is, I assume they're innocent until proven guilty, if you know what I mean. You don't know what kind of stuff they've had to deal with, getting kids to school or traffic jams or car broke down or whatever. So I figure, be a nice hostess and welcome them nonetheless, etc. The one that really kills me is when they come up to you at lunchtime or afternoon tea and says, oh, I've got to leave at 3:30, is that okay? I'm not your mother. I'm not your teacher.
Nor do you want to be their mother.
Is that, and part, again, the voice in my...
Give you the key to the shack.
I tell you what, I'm going to write a book of things I would have said if I could have, because in my voice, in my head, the little voice goes, sure, leave at 3 o'clock. We don't do anything but sit around and tell jokes for the last 2 hours. Is it okay? Will I miss anything? Hello? But I just say, look, of course, you're an adult. I know you'll make the best decision you need to make for yourself. We're going through a fair chunk this afternoon. It's a shame you'll miss it. I just,
It is quite frustrating at times, isn't it? That sort of keeping the energy up, keeping the momentum going, getting them to get into their space where they're going to be comfortable. Leanne, I'm going to swing to you. I want to think about, in that first 15 minutes, are we compelled to stand up and say something like, well, the rule book says I should give you the learning outcomes for this program? Or can we have the discretion to actually create an environment that's really conducive for people with how we frame it in that first 5 minutes? What works for you?
I think in the first few minutes, and it depends obviously on how long, how much FaceTime we actually have with them. I'm not going to do a 15-minute introduction in a 40-minute keynote. Clearly not, but I do I do hold a lot of respect for landing well in that first few minutes, and I think it is in some ways about your credibility, your bona fides, your rapport with them, warmth, creating safety, having people who might have been a bit, when they walked in, actually start to wind down. So I won't ever really short circuit whatever I believe to be a reasonable amount of time for the beginning before I start talking about the stuff we're going to be doing. If it's training, I think we do need to talk about where we're going to be raising their competence, confidence and commitment. That if we actually all really pay attention and we apply the learnings and we really invest in the day, these are the sorts of things you should be able to leave here with. I must have been a frustrated lawyer in a former life because there will always be the disclaimer. This is the sort of stuff that you should be able to do a whole lot better if you really invest in the day. But I'm big on sharing the responsibility for the learning with them. If it's a keynote, I think it's very different. It is partly entertainment, and I will be more relaxed about the content. I used to be obsessive about wanting to make a life difference to them. We will be lifelong best friends. We will never forget each other, and you will get tired and emotional every time you think of me 40 years from now because of the difference I've actually made to your life.
In 30 minutes.
In 30 minutes. And I've lowered my standards just a little bit on that, and been prepared to sell out to, let them have a memorable time, leave them with one or two really provocative things that could be really significant for them if they're willing to go away and do them, but with a healthy respect for people's defence mechanisms and for timing. If it's just not the right time in their life for them to be hearing that message, they will leave that at the door. So I want them to be there to be some substance. I don't want to be known to be an airhead, but I also want them to have a great time because that means they're safe, they're comfortable, they're open, and that's when transformational stuff can happen.
Thank you. Sandy, I'm going to finish with you.
You're going to finish.
I'm going to finish with you. I would like you to, if you were sharing your wisdom and knowledge with someone who was starting down the pathway as a learning and development professional, what would be 2 or 3 tips in the first 15 minutes that you would give to this new person?
First tip is get yourself and your environment and your flip charts and everything totally organised by at least 20 minutes before the start time, if not 30, so that as people walk in, you can do that casual, "G'day, I'm Sandy," meet them individually. And even if you only remember 2 or 3 names, you've got 2 or 3 friends when you start. Second thing I'd say is have your opening, and I don't mean rehearsed, but be really, really, really confident in what you're going to say in those first 5 minutes. What are the key dot points I'm going to cover off, because then if you've really got that chunked up in your head, you can let go of that and just be with the people. And be you. I mean, we've heard it 1,001 times. And again, as I've gotten older, that's gotten easier to be because I'm too tired to try to be anything else. But I think there's a great value as a facilitator, a trainer, whatever title you want to give yourself. I think there's great value for your learners if you allow yourself to be vulnerable. If you can give yourself permission to say, "Gee, I don't know the answer to that one." Or even, "Gee, I hadn't expected the discussion to take this tangent. Need to think for a minute about where we should go to." I mean, just be real. If people are sick of anything, and I think that's why we get some prisoners, they're sick of the chalk and talk. They're sick of the trainer, teacher, professor, whatever, who's come in and this is what I've got to teach you, and no deviation will occur from that. And I'm going to talk at you. I mean, people are tired of that, So just be real and vulnerable.
When you think culturally in Australia, we're really big on very low power distance. You know, everyone is our mate unless they're not. You bump into someone in the street, you physically bump each other. Oh, sorry, mate. So they don't want this huge mega power distance. I'm here to work on you. I'm here to work at you. I'm here to work you over. I think that's just repugnant to people. And it is about being human, but it's also, as we are, well prepared and professional, but warm and relaxed at the same time. And I agree with Sandy. I'm a big one for really almost rehearsing that intro tightly, because I think it really needs to, as we said, land really well. And a lot of that is preparation and consultation with clients and meeting people beforehand. And so just getting off to a good enough start that we can then relax into it and enjoy being with them, such that they can enjoy, you know, we make it possible for them to enjoy being with us.
Well, ladies, thank you. Thank you so much for bringing the best version of you to the program. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights as learning professionals on the couch, the Learning Couch with Dee. Can we please thank our guests, everyone? And there'll be more detail about how you might want to contact Leanne or Sandy on the screen just in front of you. Thank you.